the 2010 Constitution, saying Kenyans should take advantage of the constitutional moment that is currently available, while faulting the Court of Appeal decision to render null and void the Building Bridges initiative that sought to amend the current law of the land. President Kenyatta said the law will somehow be amended. The matter is still before the Supreme Court that will decide the fate of the BBI appeal filed by the government. Let's take a look at that story that was done by our senior political affairs reporter, Jeff Kirui.
President Uhuru Kenyatta was today making his second last State of the Nation address to a joint session of Parliament comprising the National Assembly and the Senate. The President used the occasion to expound on an issue that is close to his heart: Constitution review. The President has to have been stopped after the Court of Appeal declared it null and void. But the President is not giving up. He has given indications that the issue will be revived. Currently, the matter is before the Supreme Court.
We cannot behave like the proverbial ostrich and bury our heads in the sand. A constitutional moment does not resolve itself simply by being ignored. The need for political stabilization is, I believe, the most urgent task facing Kenyans today. And for this reason, I want to believe, honorable members, that that which did not happen will happen.
President Kenyatta, in his address, hit out at the judiciary following its decision to put brakes on efforts to amend the 2010 Constitution through the BBI process. Attorney General has filed an appeal at the Supreme Court challenging the Court of Appeal decision.
If indeed Article 1 of the 2010 Constitution states that all sovereign power rests in the people of Kenya and can be exercised either directly or through their representatives, the people made their voices heard with regard to the First Amendment. They made this petition indirectly through the county assemblies and Parliament, and the record of Parliament attests to the fact that the people of Kenya wanted a constitutional change. Individuals sat down in a back room and they decided otherwise.
In his argument, the President says Kenyans stand to lose a lot in the quest for more resource allocation and inclusivity. BBI had proposed an increase of funds allocation to counties from the current minimum of 15% to at least 35%. Besides these, the BBI had also proposed to create more executive positions at the top, to include a Prime Minister position and 2 deputies. This, he says, is crucial for political stability.
The third loss was about expanding our national executive to accommodate a broader face of Kenya and to expand representation. This would have constitutionalized the end of the winner-takes-all outcomes of elections that creates so much toxicity and tension. Again, honorable members, this did not happen.
The President also took time to explain what his government has done to contain the deadly COVID-19 virus that had brought the economy to a near halt. Currently, the world is tackling a new COVID variant, Omicron, said to be more deadly. And as other nations are applying movement restrictions, especially from South Africa and other African nations, the President has ruled out taking such extreme measures.
COVID will not be defeated by locking us all down and by shutting off parts of the world that you think are problematic. No one will be safe from COVID until we are all safe. Please, jameni, tumefanya kazi, musitufungie tena jameni.
The President urging Kenyans to turn out in large numbers to be vaccinated as a way of containing the virus. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
Well, that report by Jeff Kirui sort of highlights some of the key issues in terms of what the President had to say in the State of the Nation address. Remember, you can interact with us back at home using the hashtag InsidePolitics. We'll definitely sample some of your views. But let's get right into it. Introducing my panelists for the day, I'm joined by the Duke himself, Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst. It's great to have you with us. Equally joined by Wakili Ishmael Nyaribo right here in studio. Lawyer Mark Bichachi, equally political commentator. Thank you for your time and good morning. And from Kakamega County to give us the voice of those in Mashinani, Ken Echesa, lawyer advocate, joins us from our Kakamega studios. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. So let's get right into it, beginning with you, Dismas. Perhaps let's just briefly highlight the hits and the misses when it came to the president's speech. What did you expect to hear that you didn't, and what did the president actually rely heavily on that impressed you?
Well, in my view, I was happy when the president gave his record of achievements for the last about 10 years. And you can see that he's very happy over what he's done. He's been able to maintain Kenya to be a very stable nation, despite the turbulence in the region. But the only place where I thought that he did not communicate to morale is when he spoke about the fact that Kenya is now the 6th richest country in Africa. And he went on to paint a very, very rosy picture that Kenya is doing very well. It's on the first lane, that when you look at the infrastructure and other utilities, that we are doing very well. So one would want to ask that if indeed Kenya is the 6th richest nation in Africa, is Mora Wanjiko feeling the benefit of those resources? So for me, it doesn't make sense for Kenya to be very rich in Africa if on average Kenyans are suffering, they're not able to place food on the table. And then on the same level, the cost of energy is very high. Because when you look at Kenya as a nation and the amount of FDI we are having coming to Kenya, you expect that the president would have actually gone the extra mile during the last 10 years to make sure that Kenya is the most competitive country in the region. So when you look at the cost of energy in Kenya, it's still much higher compared to our neighbors. When you look at corruption, the president himself admitted that we've been losing 2 billion shillings a day. I expected him to tell us that he has identified those loopholes and he's going to seal them. He did not mention that. Then when you talk about impunity, Kenya keeps on disobeying court orders left, right, and center. So even international investors who want to come and do business in Kenya are not sure that if they've got a commercial dispute and they go to court and the court gives an order, it's going to be sorted out. But I was very pleased when he said that in as much as some people claim that they've stopped reggae and BBI, that BBI may come back in some fashion. Because if you go through the BBI contents, and you are a very objective person, there is so much in it that is very good for Kenya. And you know, most of the things which revolve around national stability and national economics, so I think that was a good thing. So in my view, the president and his deputy, that's Uhuru and Ruto, they should now take liabilities for everything which has gone wrong in Kenya, and the same two individuals, they take credit for everything which has happened in Kenya. Like, for instance, if you go to Nairobi town, it looks like a construction site, and which we uphold the president and his deputy for this kind of infrastructure. But on the flip side, we need to ask ourselves is, for instance, when you look at SGR, what is the actual cost of SGR? And how come the president has not made public the contract, which he promised some journalists some time ago? When you talk about all these roads, all these development projects, are they vendor-driven? Are they procurement-driven? Or are they driven by the aspirations of the citizens? Like, for instance, when you see these, all these roads are coming up, was it driven by the need to open markets so that we can, farmers can access markets, or we can, harness the factors of production? Or is some bureaucrats at the office of the president, again, you recall, is on record as having said that corruption is domiciled at his office. Yeah. So would we say that a number of these projects are vendor-driven or procurement-driven, and are we sweating the Kenyan shilling to get maximum return? So those were my primary views.
Okay, Mark Bichachi, he painted a rosy picture of Kenya's economy as it is, 6th wealthiest nation in Africa. But the question most Kenyans are asking, is it a stark reality of what is truly on the ground when we're talking about the economy, the reality of Kenya's GDP growth? What say you?
I keep asking myself that the World Bank, the IMF, the Kenya Bureau of Statistics all agree that Kenya's GDP has grown. So whenever someone asks me that question against the reality on the ground, I'm wondering which alternative statistics should I use to argue the GDP.
But does it translate to shillings in Kenyans' pockets?
Let me finish my statement. The fact that our GDP has grown is not in question. It is impossible to question that fact. We can, however, then take the approach of asking, has our GDP per capita grown? Again, the answer and the fact is yes, it has. Now, when you come to anecdotal evidence, the evidence that is derived by a lens that you want to apply to your own country that is biased towards the negative, then for sure, let us look at the country and say there is one hotel that closed, so the hotel industry is shutting down, forgetting how many 4 points, how many Sheratons, how many whatevers have opened at the same time. If you want to read the newspaper and decide to only focus on the businesses that didn't make a profit and forget the Safaricom's, the EABLs that did, then how can I help you? If you say that the roads are not helping Mora, then surely who is building those roads? Because outside my house, they are putting a new sewage line as they are across Nairobi. I do not see the people working there as though they are not Kenyans. So the fact is that there's a group of people that have decided that despite the good news of our country, we will only focus on the negative. Now, if you look at the UK, the US, any country you want to compare yourself with, did people lose jobs? Yes, they did. There was a pandemic. Right? Let me finish this, Did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay.
Sure. Exhaust your point.
What you are saying, and because you've given me the opportunity,
I've not given you any opportunity.
When you're looking at the State of the Nation address, you must look at the positives and you look at the negatives. So if you decide to shed more light on the negatives, it doesn't mean you don't like what the president is doing.
All right.
And important on the issue of GDP, you need to look at it in the context that Kenya is a land of inequities and inequalities. So you must look at every single human being. And the president is running Kenya not on behalf of a few elite powerful persons, but everybody in Kenya.
Okay, let's give Mark Bichachi
a chance. We should name the show the Dismas Show, or Dismas Interrupts Everyone Show. Because when he hears things that make him uncomfortable, he wants to jump in. Listen, we are a developing country. The fact is that from the time the colonialists left, and we had many, many years of backward growth thanks to Goldenberg and other scams, the truth is both Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta have had the task of lifting Kenyans out of poverty. The question we should ask ourselves is not whether poverty exists in Kenya. We all know it does. The question is the GDP that has grown. How many Kenyans have been lifted out of poverty? And that number exists. There are 4 million Kenyans who've been lifted out of poverty in the last 3 years. So the fact is, I do not want to argue and undo our GDP growth because it's a good thing. It's a good thing Safaricom is grown. It's a good thing EABL is making money. It's a good thing that all these blue chip companies are making money. But it is also a good thing to recognize that the efforts the government has put in to help the poorer in society have lifted 4 million Kenyans out of poverty. Is there another 4 million that needs to be lifted up? Yes, but that does not mean there was no GDP growth. And I'm not going to discuss things that are factual.
Okay, so a lot to talk about the state of the economy. Ishmael, as you add your voice to matters economy in the State of the Nation address, that constitutional moment does not resolve itself by simply being ignored. That statement by the president is very telling, but the question would be, did the president have to talk about BBI during the State of the Nation address, considering others might argue it's not a priority right now for us as a nation? What's your take on that?
Thanks, Rogers, for giving me this invitation. Now, I think it was important and it was inevitable. I mean, it was inevitable that the head of state would actually talk about anything else if he did not touch on the BBI. In the sense that he has said he wants to achieve certain things, 4-point agenda, since 2013. And when it came to 2017, he realized he was not making headway as he had promised Kenyans. Now, coming to 2017, after the skirmishes and after Raila Odinga won the elections, and then it was, I mean, as they have now confessed, everybody has confessed that they conned him out of State House. They decided to shake hands and say, okay, man, let's forget the past. Let's look how we can take the country forward. Now, BBI for Uhuru Kenyatta was the real in thing, because he was going to use it to bring the country together. The same handshake they did at the International Conference Center was going to culminate into the BBI and then bringing every leader in this country together on one table so that the winner take it all does not reoccur again. So I think that when you say that it failed at first, but it must succeed, I think we should give the Supreme Court a chance, let the Supreme Court interrogate this issue, and let's not start making some funny comments afterwards to say so-and-so was bought or so-and-so is leaning to this or that. So let's give Supreme Court a chance. If Supreme Court clears that the BBI, of course it may not happen immediately now, but if Supreme Court gives a nod for BBI, then a proper procedure will be put in place to ensure that the handshake intentions are realized later on.
Okay, well noted. Chesa, coming to us live from Kakamega. Well, what are people in Mashinani saying, especially on what the president had to say in his speech? He highlighted a lot to do with the state of the economy, but others found it wanting that he didn't talk a lot about corruption, about the Pandora Papers, perhaps. In your evaluation, what were the hits and misses?
Thank you very much, Rogers. First and foremost, let me weigh in on the economy and join my brothers Mark Bichache and Dismas Mokua in their heated debate as to whether we should go with the figures or the reality on the ground. And my example will be very simple. If you are a patient and you go to hospital and you meet a professional doctor, it matters not what the doctor tells you. What matters is how you are feeling. And probably, if you are still feeling the pain and the doctor is insisting that you are well, then it is you as a patient who is suffering. What I'm trying to say is that the president pointed a very good picture of our economy. Of course, the GDP has grown. This is a fact you cannot dispute. But the reality on the ground is that the growth of the GDP and the picture that was painted by the president is not what the common Kenyan is feeling. The common Kenyan is feeling that the state of the economy is not good. Hundreds of patients are locked up in hospitals, are not able to pay their hospital bills and be released. Hundreds of parents are not able to pay school fees for their children, and they're missing out on these fundamental rights. Millions of Kenyans are still going hungry. That is the state of the economy on the ground, away from the state of the economy on the paper and the GDP figures by the World Bank and other institutions. What we should be struggling as a nation, as economic experts, is perhaps to weigh what is said on paper by the experts and what is on the ground. Kenyans are surprised that the economy is doing well. And number two, the president was justified, in my opinion, to talk about BBI. People are asking, is this a priority? If we have to get to know whether BBI is a priority or not, we just have to ask a few questions. Is it a priority to end a culture of political violence in this country? Yes, it is. Is it a priority to allocate more resources to the grassroots through increased funding of county governments? Yes, it is. Is it a priority to bring about national cohesion and unity through an expanded executive that has always been the cause of our political violence every electoral cycle? Yes, it is. So in my opinion, the president was justified, and we do not have to resolve a constitutional moment by ignoring it. However, as to whether we should do it tomorrow or the other year is a question of fact depending on our abilities. But that statement tells you something. One, the president and the prime minister, Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga, have heavily invested in this BBI process, both mentally and by way of resources. And some people are saying it is the only avenue through which a national alliance will be built against one William Ruto. It means that appeal by the Attorney General is not in vain. It's an appeal that the top players have invested in. And secondly, the president is telling us that he is committed to the handshake between him and Raila Odinga, because BBI was a childbirth of the handshake. It is the handshake that brought about BBI. It tells you the president is keen on doing his part insofar as the handshake is concerned, and going forward, even supporting Raila Odinga for the presidency, so as to continue with the legacy that they agreed on. If it tells you that this thing is not ending here, we all know that if William Ruto took over and became the president, that is the death of BBI. In other words, the president is also advancing the Raila presidency agenda when he tells us that the BBI is here to stay. Perhaps the message that the president had in the State of the Nation address is, in my opinion, he did not address critical issues. We are going into an election year. Election years bankrupt governments. Election years destabilize governments. The president ought to have given us measures that will cushion Kenyans against the economic hostilities that could be brought about by an expensive election we are going towards in 2022.
Okay, well noted, and thanks for your contribution on that. Perhaps as a quick rejoinder, I'll start with you, Bichachi. That which did not happen will happen. Your quick thoughts on the BBI process.
You know, one of the things that we must face is this: whether there is a BBI process or not, the ideas that were raised by the BBI cannot be stopped. We've seen every single politician, every single leader talking about more money to devolution. We've seen every single leader realizing, look at One Kenya, look at the people coalescing around UDA. There's an obvious desire to have a more inclusive representative executive. So the propaganda that was around the BBI is falling apart. Because it's even becoming quite apparent that one of the biggest beneficiaries of BBI is actually the person who squealed about it the most, the deputy president. He would have more allies today if he supported the BBI. So the benefits of the BBI, whether through a referendum or piecemeal, will have to come to be, because it espouses the dreams and the ambitions of the Kenyan people.
Dismas, as you expand on that, the economic reality and what the president actually had to say in his speech, was he out of touch? Would you say that?
Yeah, two important questions. Yeah. When you talk about BBI, BBI, in my view, is an indispensable proposition in Kenya's position as a going concern. Because the ideas contained in BBI is what every presidential candidate is talking about today, is what every political party is talking about today. And I'll not be surprised if some of those ideas sneak or find themselves in those political party manifestos. Because one of the things we need to do in Kenya is to guarantee ourselves that during every electoral cycle, we do not spend the last 1 year in panic and the first year in panic again because we don't know about the electoral outcomes. And the only reason why a number of people opposed the BBI is simply because they did not originate the idea. So they felt they were behaving like jilted lovers, that if it's not my idea, then it's a bad idea. And believe me, those ideas, in my view, every Kenyan must support them because they are consistent with our national interest and they are consistent with the public interest. Now, talking about the economic issues, the president did not mention the public debts. And you know, in an interesting turn of events, then the minister responsible for the national treasury, the following day says that Kenya has borrowed so much that we may slide into a crisis. So now you're beginning to ask yourself, the president paints a rosy picture, saying that the economy is doing A1, but the minister responsible for the national treasury, the following day says, wait a minute, our public debt may occasion a lot of disaster. And part of the reason why we've got a crisis with our fiscal and monetary management is a lot of money generated today in Kenya goes to pay taxation, goes for the public debt, depending on the statistics. And believe you me, if you're a clever person, you can sweat statistics to give you any position under the sun. You can manipulate statistics. You can say 4 million people have gotten out of poverty. But these figures, where do they come from? They come from the same government that is praising themselves. In fact, when you're saying that the Uhuru administration has been a success, who is determining that there are success? Is it the president himself? Is it Mora? Is it Wanjiko? The other day you saw a number of people in slums in Nairobi who were kicked out of their homesteads. They've been sleeping on empty stomachs. They've been rained on. Now you tell them that the Uhuru administration has been a success. Where are they?
Perhaps as you also come in talk about because there are a couple of things that were missing in terms of his speech, were not really in terms of reality. The fertilizer issue, the cost, because we saw a couple of governors come through and contradict what the president said.
Yeah. And this is mostly, caused by the level of corruption in the country, in the institutions, in the judiciary. And by the way, I know we have, the show has already, addressed this issue in the past. But when you look at Sonko leaks, for example, and you look at the judiciary, and you look at the perception of corruption that is, people feel that there is corruption going on in the judiciary. When you look at that, and then you come to the BBI document, and you see the BBI is trying to introduce an ombudsman, a special kind of ombudsman, other than the one that is now, under the JSC. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you will realize that everybody wants to agree with the president's quest to fulfill his 4-point agenda. Yeah. At least he's saying, I know where we have come from. I have spoken with my brother Raila Odinga. I know where we are going. It's important we are given the chance to take the country forward by eradicating certain things. Yeah. Now, you see, if you live in institutions alone, now again, we're talking about the IEBC much later probably, you will see that even if these institutions feel they are independent, they in fact are not independent. When you look at this kind of things as Sonko has brought up, I mean, we believe all judges are independent, but are they in the actual fact independent or not? Okay. So when you talk about other people murmuring that the president did not address certain things, I agree entirely with them. Like he did not talk about corruption, but he has been talking about that. Prices of fertilizers, maize itself. By the way, citizens are complaining that the maize price is too high. Farmers who do maize farming are complaining that the prices are too low. Yeah. So there cannot be a time when all people agree on one thing. Yeah. But I think at least there's one more State of the Nation address before the next elections. So we hope that the president can correct that. But the very fundamental important thing for me is that the president and Raila Odinga should be given a chance, at least to turn around the country in terms of, winner take it all problem, at least is eradicated.
Okay. We'll see whether that constitutional moment will be resolved, not just by being ignored. Allow us to take a short break on the show. Definitely a lot to talk about. But as we come back, something Nyaribo mentioned, the independents and whether they're truly independent. We'll focus on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, who just recently exited that multi-sectoral consultative forum by various government agencies. We'll get to talk more about that and the state of preparedness come 2022. Stay with Inside Politics.